Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with RotoCurve.com, and I'm here to bring you today's section of Benny's Bats. The idea of the Benny's Bats section is we try to look at each pitcher that's on the mound for the day, talk about what their weaknesses are, and figure out which guys on the other team profile to do the best against them. We have a 10-game slate today for Monday night, August 17th, and let's get right into it. Got a couple young pitchers on the mound, which are always a little bit tough to gauge, but I'll try to give you as much information as I could find on them so that we can make a pretty good decision about how we want to attack them. The first guy in that group is Matt Barnes from the Boston Red Sox. He is a right-handed pitcher. He's allowed right-handed bats to hit for a higher average against them in the minor leagues this year. In the majors this year, so far, he's only had limited innings as a relief pitcher. This is the first start that he's going to be making so far this year in the major leagues. Against him, guys in that Cleveland team, you could look at a guy like Michael Brantley, who should be back in the lineup today. He has a 383 WOBA with a 168 ISO number. He's the one guy that really stands out overall. I don't expect Barnes to pitch very deep into this game. If he makes it 5 innings, that'll probably be a lot. I expect this to be a bullpen game for the Red Sox team. So you're going to see all those relievers come in probably by the middle of the game. So even though he is starting against Barnes, you're probably only going to see Barnes go maybe once or probably twice through the lineup unless he gets shelled. So he'll probably pitch to everybody 2 times and be out of this game by the 5th inning. So again, I mean, the Boston bullpen hasn't been lights out this year. So I guess you could probably look at some of these Cleveland bats, but there's nobody who really stands out based on the numbers. Next guy we can talk about is Williams Perez. Perez has allowed left-handed bats to hit 290 against him with 5 home runs and 32 innings pitched. The only problem I have here is there aren't a lot of left-handed bats in that San Diego Padres team that you really want to target. I mean, you got guys like Yangervis Solarte, Yonder Alonso, Will Venable, but none of them are really, world beaters or guys who have huge WOBAs with good ISOs or look like they're in a great matchup for today. The one guy who does do well in righty-on-righty matchups is Justin Upton. 364 WOBA, 219 ISO score, does have some power and would probably be the one guy that I would look to take against Perez. But again, this game's in San Diego, not a ballpark that yields a lot of runs or a lot of hits, so not a game I'm really looking to target a lot of bats against. Let's see. Next guy on the other side of that game is Colin Rea. Rea is making his second start for the San Diego Padres. He's a right-handed pitcher as well. Right-handed bats had a higher average against them the last 2 years in AAA. The Braves have been winning lately, but I'm not really sure how they're doing it. If you look at that lineup, there's nobody who really stands out. There's no big bats. Jace Peterson and A.J. Pierzynski are probably 2 of the bigger left-handed bats that they do have in the lineup. So I guess those would be 2 guys that would make a little bit of sense to target. But again, games in San Diego, not expected to see a lot of runs. And, I just don't see anybody whose numbers really stand out that makes me believe I have to have them in my lineup. If you can find some of those guys cheap as a salary saving option, I guess you can go that way. But I try to target games that are in, higher scoring environments that have a higher over under and, just a little bit more certainty in it. Next guy we can talk about, Justin Nicolino, left-handed pitcher for the Miami Marlins. He's making his 4th start so far this season. Right-handed bats hit 302 against him in the minors and 317 against him so far in the majors. And he is a left-handed pitcher, so that's the split that he had been struggling most with. But even left-handed bats had a 294 average against them in the minors and a 286 average so far against them in the majors. So you can probably stack up, bats on this Milwaukee team and look at guys from both sides of the plate. 2 guys who profile to do pretty well today. Shane Peterson has actually been hitting pretty well against left-handed pitching. Has a 370 WOBA, not a lot of power with a 111 ISO score, but this is a guy who's been getting a couple extra base hits because of his speed. So I think he could be somebody that's in play. The one guy who I like the most is actually Ryan Braun. 397 WOBA, 238 ISO number, so he's easily the top option that you want to use and probably one of the better outfield options on the entire day here today. The game is in Milwaukee, so it's a good hitter's ballpark, and I expect to see that Brewers team put up a couple runs. Next guy we can talk about is Chris Tillman. Tillman's actually been kind of solid. Both sides of the plate are only hitting about 265 against him, which isn't great, but it's not horrible either. And most of the home run power has come out of right-handed bats. Now, that Oakland team doesn't really have too many big right-handed bats in that lineup. The 2 guys who do profile to do well in the lefty-righty split against Tillman, though, are Stephen Vogt, who's at a 361 WOBA and a 226 ISO, and Josh Reddick, 371 WOBA, 199 ISO. Both of these guys have good numbers, but they both had much better numbers a few weeks ago. Both guys have been slumping lately, so I'm not really looking to target too much of that Athletics team. But if you need a couple guys to fit in there, those are the two that make the most sense for me to use. Let's see. We got Jeremy Hellickson going up against the Pirates today. Left-handed bats have hit 284 against him. He has kept the ball in the ballpark, though. He hasn't given up a lot of home runs, not a lot of power shots. Let's see. Two guys who I really like. You got Andrew McCutchen with a 389 WOBA, 229 ISO number, and righty-on-righty matchup. So he's somebody you can look at, although Hellickson has been a little bit tougher on righties. The left-handed bat who I think is in the best spot is Gregory Polanco. Polanco has hits in 9 straight games right now. He has at least 8 DraftKings points in each of those 9 games, including 7 games where he's reached into double digits. And in 6 of those 9s, he's had multiple hits, 2 or 3 hits. He's getting 4 or 5 at-bats leading off on top. He's 18 for his last 40 right now. So Polanco is somebody who's a little bit cheap on a lot of the sites. I know he's a guy who made his way into my first Fantasy Feud roster over there. I really liked his price over on Feud. If you guys don't know, Feud still has a couple qualifiers going on for their big $500,000 end of the year tournament. It's the biggest tournament that we have left. DraftKings and Fantasy Aces just had their live final last week. There's no more seats. The finals for the finals for the FanDuel. The seats for the FanDuel final are actually all locked up right now. So the only way you can still get a seat to a big end of the year tournament for MLB is over on Fantasy Feud. If you guys haven't signed up, make sure you use the promo code CURVE. You'll get a 100% deposit bonus as well as $25 from the RotoCurve site in order to start off and try out the Fantasy Feud website and see if you like. It's a little bit different than what everyone's used to. They do have 3 starting pitchers that you're allowed to use. And the pricing is a little bit different, but you are able to fit in some stud bats if you find 1 or 2 of those cheap guys that you can get in there. And Polanco is one of those guys who's pretty reasonably priced and doesn't make it hard for you to really have to pay up. The next guy I want to talk about, Erasmo Ramirez. Right-handed bats are hitting 253 against him. Left-handed bats are only hitting 191. He's been pretty good so far this year. At Houston, which is a park downgrade for him, he has 2 guys that you really got to look at on that team. Carlos Correa with a 379 WOBA and a 240 ISO score, and Preston Tucker with a 373 WOBA and a 267 ISO score are the 2 guys who look like they're in the best spots against a guy like Ramirez. They should be hitting 3 and 4 in that order for Houston. And if you can still find them cheap, I think they're decent plays. Tucker is still cheap in a lot of spots, Feud being one of them, and Fantasy Aces, his price is a little bit up, but I think I still had him in my lineup over there because I liked him more than some of the other options who are a little more expensive today. Let's see. We got Matt Garza. Garza has allowed left-handed bats to hit 286 against him with a 158 whip this year, and he's already given up 20 total home runs in only 130 innings worth of work. The only guy on that Marlins team he's going up against that really makes some sense to me is Derek Dietrich. Dietrich has a 374 WOBA with a 236 ISO number, so he's probably the best option. You can look at guys like D. Gordon and Christian Yelich batting up on the top of that order, maybe even a Justin Bour or an Ichiro Suzuki if they're in there. The left-handed bats is how you really want to go after Garza. So I think Miami's going to throw a whole bunch of left-handed bats at him today. So you could see all 5 of those guys in the lineup. Left-handers have been that good against him that, you may even want to consider stacking them up. Although I got to be honest, I'm not a big fan of stacking Marlins. There's just not a lot of pop in that offense. But they are getting a park upgrade going over and playing in Miller Park over in Milwaukee. Next guy we can look at, CC Sabathia. Sabathia has been horrible at home. He has an ERA at home over 6. And right-handed bats have hit 329 against him this year with 21 home runs and 99 innings pitched and a whip of 1.66. So I think the way you want to go after him is looking at some of these right-handed bats. Let's see. Aaron Hicks has been pretty solid lately. 436 WOBA, 235 ISO number. He's been hitting some home runs. He's hitting up on top of that order, either in the 1 or 2 hole, along with Brian Dozier, who has a 367 WOBA and a 244 ISO number. I think both of those guys are in play. Hicks is usually a cheaper outfield option that does have some pop. Should be getting those extra at-bats, hitting on top of that order and on the road. And Dozier is either going to be hitting in front or behind him. And for a second baseman with a 244 ISO score, that's a pretty high upside that he has there. So I think both of these guys are in play, and they're both guys that you should consider today. On the other side of that game, we got Kyle Gibson. Gibson's allowed right-handed bats to hit 284 against him with 10 home runs in 69 innings. Two guys who have profiled the best against him from the right side, Mark Teixeira, 409 WOBA with a 348 ISO number. He's been absolutely on fire this year against left-handed pitching, showing off a lot of power. He's been hitting some home runs. So I definitely think he's one of the guys that you want to look at. Another guy you want to look at is Carlos Beltran. Beltran's starting to heat up again lately, which is perfect timing for the Yankees, who can use another big bat in that lineup. He has a 360 WOBA with a 219 ISO number, so I think he's another guy that could be in play. Remember, both of these guys are switch hitters, and they are going to be batting from the left side. Gibson has been a little bit tougher on left-handed batters this year than right-handed batters, but they are the two guys who profile best against right-handed pitching. I think you can also use A-Rod. A-Rod's kind of fallen off a little bit. His WOBA against righties is down to 348. His ISO score is down to 197 in righty-on-righty matchups. He's always been better against lefties, so it's not that that's a huge downgrade, but he was over the 360 and 200 mark not too long ago. So he has been struggling a little bit in his recent at-bats. But I do still think in a righty-on-righty matchup against a guy who struggles righty-on-righty like Gibson, I think A-Rod's another guy that you can look at here. Let's see. We got Carlos Rodon as the next guy up. Right-handed bats have been smashing him. 297 batting average, 7 home runs in 64 innings pitched, and a whip of 1.81. Mike Trout with a 417 WOBA and a 299 ISO is probably on top of this list. Albert Pujols, the other guy. Again, Pujols has been struggling a little bit lately, but 368 WOBA for him, 267 ISO number. Right-handed bats are how you want to go after Rodon, so I definitely think those two are the ones that stand out. There are a couple other right-handed bats that you will see in that order. Do not take any of the lefties today. Guys like a Cole Calhoun should be given a day off. Any of the other lefties that they just brought over there to that Angels team. Rodon is very tough on left-handed batters, so I'm not looking at any left-handed batters. I don't want them anywhere near any of my cash or tournament lineups today. Let's see. We got Chris Heston. Heston has been pretty solid. Left-handed bats have done the best against him with a 253 batting average and 7 home runs in 63 innings pitched. The only left-handed bat that I'm going to target against Heston today is going to be my boy Matt Carpenter. Carp has got a 382 WOBA, 221 ISO score. Again, I say it all the time. He's not somebody who normally hits a lot of home runs, but the way he's been playing over the last couple weeks, I think we have to stop worrying about that at this point. And, not only is he a stud cash game play because of the consistency that he has, but I think you got to start considering him as a daily GPP play as well. Like I said, I always use him in cash games. I tell you guys, be careful. He doesn't have a ton of upside, but he has something like 6 or 7 home runs in the past 2 weeks. I mean, that's legitimate power hitting kind of numbers. It's not really his game. It's not what he's known for. But again, if he's hot, you might as well keep riding with it. So I definitely think Carpenter is the guy that's in play, always in play for cash. And I think I'm even coming around to the fact that you can probably use him in tournaments as well. Let's see. We got Taijuan Walker as the next guy up. Taijuan Walker has a little bit of a reverse splits going on. Right-handed bats are hitting 253 against him with 12 home runs and 57 innings pitched. Against Texas, though, you got to look at the left-handed bats because they don't have a lot of big right-handed bats outside of Adrian Beltre, who hasn't been having a great season. The left-handed bats that do well against right-handed pitching, you got guys like Prince Fielder, 405 WOBA, 156 ISO, Mitch Moreland, 394 WOBA, 255 ISO, and Sin-Shu Chu, who's got his WOBA up to 376 and his ISO up to 221 after a pretty slow start. Texas is a really good place to hit, especially late in the summer when the weather starts heating up. So Walker has had some really good games. Walker has also had some really bad games. So I think if you're going to do anything here, stacking up some of those left-handed bats and hoping this is a bad game is not the worst idea I've ever heard of. Let's see. Andrew Haney is the next guy up. He's been really good since he's come up, although his last 2 starts have been a little rocky. He goes up against the White Sox, and the White Sox aren't really all that good against left-handed pitching. So I don't see a lot of guys here that I want to target against Haney, and he's probably one of the guys that I'm going to stay away from targeting bats against. Scott Kazmir, left-hander, going up for Houston against Tampa Bay. Right-handed bats tend to do better against Kazmir, and Tampa Bay as a team has a lot of right-handed bats that hit left-handed pitching pretty well. They're getting a park bump moving from Tampa Bay to Houston. So I think that you can look at some of these Tampa Bay righties today. Logan Forsythe has a 395 WOBA, 316 ISO against left-handed pitching this year. He's flashed most of his home run power against the lefties, so I think this could be a good spot for him. Evan Longoria has always hit left-handed pitching well. This year he has a 397 WOBA with a 181 ISO, so he's another guy who I think could be in there. That's basically the 3-4 batters for Tampa Bay in the middle of that order, going up against Kazmir, who has gotten knocked around a little bit after being pretty dominant in his first start coming over to Houston. So I do like this game a little bit today for the Tampa Bay bats. I'd like to see who else they have above and below Forsythe and Longoria in the middle of that order. I don't think I'd stack it up. I don't think Kazmir's a horrible pitcher. But again, those are some pretty good numbers that both Longoria and Forsythe have against left-handed pitching. So I think they could find their way into a couple of my cash games and maybe even into a couple tournament rosters. Let's see. Next guy, Cole Hamels. After his no-hitter, Cole Hamels hasn't been very good. In the last 2 games, he's pitched 13 innings, given up 16 hits, 3 walks, 9 runs. And the big stat for me is 5 home runs. So you got a left-handed pitcher who's been giving up a lot of home runs to right-handed bats lately, and he's going up against Seattle. Now, there's 2 guys on Seattle that I'm going to be targeting. Nelson Cruz, 498 WOBA, 358 ISO number. I mean, the numbers don't get any better than that for somebody in a lefty-righty split. He got banged up a little bit last week, didn't really have a good game yesterday. But again, those numbers just completely jump off the page at you. So if I'm going to be using anybody, it's going to be Nelson Cruz. The other guy I want to consider, Franklin Gutierrez, has been absolutely on fire. He's got his WOBA up above 400. He's got an ISO score up above 250 at this point. He had a 2 home run game yesterday. And whenever they play against left-handed pitching, he finds himself in the middle of that order. He's probably going to be hitting 5th today behind guys like Cruz, Cano, and Seager. So he should get plenty of RBI opportunities. And the way he's been playing lately, I think he's somebody that you definitely have to put in your lineup. His problem has always been staying healthy. But when he's healthy, he's actually a pretty good producer. And he's showing you why this year, because he's been very good over the course of the last couple weeks. Let's see. We got Garrett Cole going up against Arizona at Pittsburgh. I love those Arizona bats, but I'm not targeting any of them today. Garrett Cole's been pretty solid all season long, so I just don't think this is a very good spot to roll out Arizona guys. You got Danny Salazar going up against the Red Sox. Salazar's numbers are pretty sick this year. Left-handed bats are hitting 215 against him. Right-handed bats are hitting 209 against him, although he has given up 17 home runs, 10 to lefties in about 65 innings, 7 to righties in about 70 innings. So I think if you're going to do anything, you want to look at the left-handed power bats here. A guy like David Ortiz, 399 WOBA, 285 ISO score. Maybe even an Alejandro De Aza, 397 WOBA, 214 ISO. They would probably be the only 2 guys that I even considered rolling out. And even then, you know, like I said, Salazar's been pretty good. So I'm not really looking to target guys against him. But if I did have to roll somebody out, I think Ortiz is really interesting for a tournament play. I think he could still get into a home run. Salazar throws it hard, but he has been hit for a couple home runs this year, and Poppy has been killing right-handed pitching all season, basically his entire career. So I think that might be the one guy I'd look at. Next guy, the only other guy left on the mound today is Sonny Gray. Sonny Gray, 184 average to left-handed bats, 213 average to right-handed bats. Playing Baltimore, who's a high strikeout team, especially against right-handed pitching. The only guy who's been hot for Baltimore, well, actually, Baltimore as a team has been pretty hot, but the guy who's been the hottest that actually has a decent profile here is probably Chris Davis, 372 WOBA against righties with a 306 ISO score. Obviously, Machado is the other guy up on top of that order who's also been hitting well. But again, I'm not really looking to target a whole bunch of bats against Sonny Gray. Sonny Gray is a very good pitcher. It's just not a game where I think that you're going to get a lot of upside by using a lot of those Orioles bats. They scored their 18 runs yesterday. I'm not expecting them to get anywhere near 18 again today here. So that pretty much wraps it up for today. Like I said, we only had 10 games, so I went through each pitcher on the mound. There are a couple guys who I don't think it makes sense to target against. There are a couple other guys who I think you can stack up, and there are a couple other games with young pitchers that are going to turn into bullpen games for you too, which are always tough to figure out. It's not a huge slate with the 10 games that they have here today, but again, it is another day of MLB DFS that we get to play, so I wanted to make sure I broke down the matchups for you guys. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to come over to the forums at rotocurve.com. We're starting to put out some of our football content now. We'll have more of that up in the next 2 weeks or so. This way you guys can read through it and ask any questions that you might have about the football content before football season starts. I know a lot of people with the preseason games this week have switched off MLB and have gotten into NFL mode at this point. But we still have another month and a half left of the MLB season, and it definitely gives you something to do to grind early on in the week, some MLB games. Help you build that bankroll up so that you have some money for those Sunday NFL contests that everybody loves so much. So this is Benny Ricciardi with Benny's Bat Section at rotocurve.com. Thank you guys for joining us today, and as always, stay classy, DFS.